The story of Cambodia is a river of time, with currents of unparalleled brilliance and terrifying darkness. It flows from the prehistoric communities along the Mekong, through the Indianized trading kingdom of Funan, and into the unparalleled glory of the Angkorian Empire. For centuries, Khmer god-kings commanded a vast territory from a capital that was the envy of the world, leaving behind stone testaments like Angkor Wat and the Bayon, legacies that continue to define the nation's soul and identity. Yet this majestic peak was followed by a long, painful descent into the Dark Ages, where a shrunken kingdom was squeezed between the ambitions of Siam and Vietnam, its sovereignty slowly eroded. The arrival of the French offered a reprieve from regional predators, but at the cost of independence, ushering in a colonial era that both preserved and exploited the nation. The 20th century unleashed a torrent of new traumas: the impossible neutrality during the Vietnam War, the devastation of American bombing, a brutal civil war, and then the ultimate abyss, the Khmer Rouge genocide, a catastrophe that tore the fabric of society apart and left scars that may never fully heal. The journey since the fall of Pol Pot has been one of slow, agonizing, and yet remarkable recovery. From the Vietnamese occupation and the long civil war to the hope of the UN-brokered peace and the subsequent consolidation of one-party rule, Cambodia's path has been complex and fraught with challenges. Today, as a new generation takes the reins of power, the nation stands at a critical juncture. It is a country defined by its youth, its burgeoning economy, and the indelible spirit of its people. Yet it is also shaped by the long shadows of its past, the glory of Angkor, which inspires national pride, and the trauma of the killing fields, which serves as a constant, sobering reminder of the fragility of peace and humanity. The history of Cambodia is ultimately a profound testament to survival and resilience, a story of a people who have endured the unimaginable and continue to strive against all odds to build a future worthy of their incredible heritage. A comprehensive history of Cambodia. Introduction. The history of Cambodia is a story of dramatic heights and devastating lows. It is the story of a civilization that built one of the world's most magnificent architectural wonders, the Angkorian Temple complex, and commanded a vast empire across Southeast Asia. It is also the story of a nation that endured centuries of foreign domination, colonial rule, and ultimately a self-inflicted genocide that defies comprehension. From the divine kings of Angkor to the killing fields of the Khmer Rouge, Cambodia's past is a profound testament to both the creative and destructive capacities of humanity. To understand modern Cambodia is to understand this long, complex, and often tragic journey of resilience, faith, and survival. 1. Prehistoric Cambodia. The earliest inhabitants. Long before the rise of great kingdoms, the land we now know as Cambodia was home to early human populations. Archaeological evidence, most notably from the Lang Speen cave in Battambang province, suggests human habitation dating back at least 70,000 years. These early inhabitants were hunter-gatherers, part of the Hoabinhian culture that flourished across mainland Southeast Asia. They fashioned simple stone tools, hunted the region's rich fauna, and gathered plants from the dense forests. By the Neolithic period, around 4000 BCE, a significant transformation occurred. These early Cambodians began to practice agriculture, cultivating rice in the fertile floodplains of the Mekong River and around the Great Lake, the Tonle Sap. This agricultural revolution allowed for the establishment of permanent settlements and the development of more complex social structures. Polished stone tools, pottery, and personal adornments from this era indicate a growing sophistication. The subsequent Bronze Age, c. 1500 BCE, and Iron Age, c. 1500, 500 BCE, saw the development of metallurgy, with skilled artisans producing intricate bronze drums, tools, and weapons. These prehistoric communities, with their organized villages, agricultural base, and developing technology, laid the foundational groundwork upon which the first Cambodian states would be built. They were the ancestors of the Khmer people, whose linguistic and cultural identity was beginning to form. 2. The Kingdom of Funan, the Proto-Khmer state, c. 106th century CE. The first great polity to emerge in the region was the Kingdom of Funan, a name given by Chinese chroniclers who documented its existence. Flourishing from the 1st to the 6th century CE, Funan was a powerful maritime trading state centered in the Mekong Delta. Its strategic location made it a crucial hub on the trade routes connecting India and China, and through them the Roman Empire and Persia. The archaeological site of O Chi Ao in modern-day Vietnam, believed to be Phunan's main port, has yielded a trove of artifacts including Roman coins, Indian jewelry, and Chinese silks, attesting to its cosmopolitan nature. Funan was heavily Indianized, meaning it adopted key cultural, religious, and political models from India. Its elite embraced Hinduism, particularly the worship of Shiva and Vishnu, and later Buddhism, adopted Sanskrit as the language of the court and religion, and organized its state around the concept of a divine monarch. The legend of Funan's founding, involving the marriage of an Indian Brahmin named Kondinya to a local Naga princess Soma, symbolically represents this fusion of foreign influence and indigenous culture. Funan was not a monolithic empire, but rather a network of city-states bound by trade and a shared culture, controlled by a central authority. It established the political and cultural template that would profoundly influence its successor, Chenla, and the later Khmer Empire. 3. The rise of Chenla, the pre-Angkorian transition, c. 6th-8th century. By the late 6th century, the power of Funan began to wane. A former vassal state to the north, known to the Chinese as Chenla, began to assert its dominance. Led by ambitious rulers like Bavavarman I and Mahendravarman, Chenla expanded southward, eventually absorbing the territories of Funan. This marked a significant shift in the center of power, from the coastal trading ports of the Delta inland to the agricultural heartlands of the Mekong River basin. The Chenla period is considered the direct precursor to the Angkorian era. Its kings continued the Indianized traditions of Funan, sponsoring the construction of the first stone temples in Cambodia, primarily dedicated to Shiva. Important religious sites from this era, such as Sambor Prey Kuk, the capital under King Izanavarman I, feature clusters of brick temple towers decorated with exquisite sandstone carvings. However, Chenla's unity was fragile. By the 8th century, Chinese annals describe it as having split into two rival polities, Land Chenla, located in the upper Mekong region, and Water Chenla, controlling the lower Mekong and coastal areas. This period of fragmentation and internal conflict left the Khmer people vulnerable to outside influence, particularly from the powerful Srivijaya maritime empire based in Java and Sumatra. 4. Jayavarman II and the birth of the Khmer Empire. 802 CE. The fragmentation of Chenla set the stage for the arrival of Cambodia's most pivotal figure, Jayavarman II. Details of his early life are shrouded in mystery, but inscriptions state that he came from Java, which could refer to the island of Java or the Srivijayan Empire, to restore order and unify the Khmer lands. In a series of military campaigns and political maneuvers, he consolidated his power over the disparate Khmer principalities. The defining moment of his reign and the official birth date of the Khmer Empire occurred in 802 CE. On Mount Kulan, a sacred plateau northeast of the future site of Angkor, Jayavarman II conducted a sacred Hindu ritual performed by a Brahmin priest. This ceremony had a profound purpose: to declare Cambodia's independence from Java and to establish a new potent state ideology. He proclaimed himself Chakravartin, universal monarch, and, more importantly, established the cult of the Devaraja, or God King. This cult identified the king as a living manifestation of a deity, usually Shiva, whose divine essence was housed in a sacred linga within the state temple. This masterstroke of political theology unified the kingdom under a single divine authority, legitimizing the king's absolute power and laying the spiritual and political foundation for the next 600 years of the Khmer Empire. 5. The zenith of Angkor, the great builders, c. 9th-12th century. Following Jayavarman II, a succession of powerful god kings expanded the empire's territory and embarked on an unparalleled building program. King Indravarman I, or Rio, established the first major hydraulic system, constructing a massive reservoir, or barai, to manage water for rice cultivation, a key to the empire's prosperity. His successor, Yasovarman I, moved the capital to the area now known as Angkor and named it Yasodharapura. He established the city's basic layout and constructed the East Barai. For the next 2 centuries, kings like Rajendravarman II and Udayadityavarman II built magnificent temple mountains, each serving as the state temple and the symbolic center of the universe. The Baphuon Temple, a colossal pyramid of sandstone, was one of the grandest of its time. However, the period reached an early apex under Suryavarman I, or 100 Olof or 100 Olof and 30. This was the classical age of Angkor, a time of immense wealth, military might, and artistic achievement. The empire controlled a vast territory encompassing parts of modern-day Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, and the Malay Peninsula, its power fueled by agricultural surplus, tribute from vassals, and a highly organized administration. 6. Angkor Wat, a wonder of the world. The ultimate expression of the Angkorian Golden Age is Angkor Wat, built by King Suryavarman II in the early 12th century. It is the largest religious monument in the world and a masterpiece of Khmer architecture. Unlike most other state temples dedicated to Shiva, Angkor Wat was dedicated to Vishnu. Its orientation to the west, rather than the east, has led scholars to believe it may have also served as Suryavarman II's funerary temple. The temple is a stone microcosm of the Hindu universe. Its 5 central towers represent the peaks of Mount Meru, the mythical home of the gods. The surrounding moats symbolize the cosmic ocean. Every surface is intricately carved. The temple's most remarkable features are the vast bas-relief galleries that encircle its main structure. These carvings, stretching for nearly a kilometer, depict epic tales from Hindu mythology, such as the Battle of Kurukshetra from the Mahabharata and the churning of the Ocean of Milk. They also include a grand procession of King Suryavarman II with his armies, providing a vivid snapshot of courtly life and military power. The construction of Angkor Wat required immense resources, thousands of skilled artisans, and an army of laborers, a testament to the staggering power and devotion of the Khmer Empire at its peak. 7. Jayavarman VII, the Buddhist king and his prolific reign, 181 to c. 1218. The period after Suryavarman II was one of turmoil. The neighboring kingdom of Champa sacked the Khmer capital in 1177, plunging the empire into chaos. From this disaster emerged another of Cambodia's greatest kings, Jayavarman VII, a prince who had been in exile. He rallied the Khmer forces, drove out the Cham invaders, and was crowned king in 1181. Jayavarman VII ushered in a dramatic shift in the empire's ideology. He was a devout follower of Mahayana Buddhism, and his reign was characterized by a focus on compassion and public welfare, a stark contrast to the Hindu-centric focus of his predecessors. He was the empire's most prolific builder, but his projects were of a different nature. He constructed a new capital city, Angkor Thom, a vast walled enclosure. At its heart stood the enigmatic Bayon Temple, with its 216 giant serene stone faces, believed to be a representation of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, with whom the king identified. He also built the stunning Ta Prohm Temple, which he dedicated to his mother, and Prisa Khan, dedicated to his father, and Preta Khan, dedicated to his father. Most remarkably, his building program extended beyond temples to infrastructure. He established a network of 102 hospitals, numerous rest houses along the empire's roads, and new reservoirs. His reign represented the empire's final, explosive burst of creative and territorial energy. 8. The long decline of the Khmer Empire, 13th–15th century. The colossal building projects of Jayavarman VII, while magnificent, placed an enormous strain on the empire's resources and manpower. After his death around 1218, the Khmer Empire entered a long and gradual period of decline. The reasons for this decline are complex and multifaceted, with no single cause being solely responsible. One major factor was constant external pressure. The rising power of the Siamese kingdom of Ayutthaya to the west launched repeated invasions, sacking Angkor in 1431. This military pressure drained the empire's strength. Internally, a significant religious shift was underway. The state-sponsored Mahayana Buddhism and the Hindu Devaraja cult were gradually replaced by the more egalitarian and less centralized Theravada Buddhism, which became the dominant faith of the people. This new faith did not require massive temple mountains for its practice, thus undermining the ideological justification for the god king and his lavish construction projects. Environmental factors may have also played a crucial role. Some scholars theorize that the complex water management system of Angkor, the source of its agricultural wealth, became too difficult to maintain or was damaged by cycles of drought and flood, leading to ecological collapse. Finally, a shift in maritime trade routes may have favored coastal ports over the inland capital, reducing Angkor's economic importance. 9. The post-Angkorian period, the Dark Ages, 15th–19th century. Following the Siamese sack of Angkor in 1431, the Khmer court abandoned the great city. This marked the beginning of the Middle Period, or Dark Ages of Cambodian history. The capital was moved southward, closer to the Mekong River, first to Longvek and later to Udong. This move reflected a strategic shift from an inland, agrarian-based power to a state more engaged in regional riverine and maritime trade. This era was characterized by a struggle for survival. The Khmer kingdom, a shadow of its former imperial self, was caught between two powerful and expansionist neighbors, Siam, modern Thailand, to the west and Vietnam to the east. The centuries that followed were marked by repeated invasions, the plundering of its cities, and the forced deportations of thousands of Khmer artisans, scholars and members of the royal court to Siam. Khmer kings often had to pay tribute to both neighbors simultaneously, becoming vassals in a desperate attempt to maintain a semblance of sovereignty. Despite this political decline, Cambodian culture endured. Theravada Buddhism flourished, and this period produced important literary works like the Remka, the Cambodian version of the Ramayana. From the 17th to the 19th century, the rivalry between Siam and Vietnam over control of the weakened Khmer kingdom intensified. Cambodia became a billiard ball, knocked back and forth between these two regional powers. Both sought to install pro-Siamese or pro-Vietnamese monarchs on the throne in Udong, leading to frequent succession crises, civil wars and foreign interventions. Siam's influence was often cultural and political, demanding tribute and loyalty. Vietnam's influence was more direct and aimed at outright absorption. In the 1830s, Vietnam, under Emperor Minh Mang, launched a systematic campaign to Vietnamize Cambodia. Khmer officials were replaced with Vietnamese ones, Cambodians were forced to adopt Vietnamese customs and dress, and Khmer temples were suppressed. This heavy-handed policy provoked a massive Cambodian rebellion, which Siam then supported to counter Vietnamese influence. The result was a devastating war fought on Cambodian soil, which ended in 1845 with an agreement that placed Cambodia under the joint suzerainty of both Siam and Vietnam. This precarious arrangement left Cambodia politically neutered and on the verge of being completely erased from the map. 11. The arrival of the French, the Protectorate of Cambodia, 1863. Facing the imminent dissolution of his kingdom, King Norodom R. 1860–1904 made a fateful decision. Seeking an external power to protect Cambodia from its rapacious neighbors, he turned to France, which was then establishing its colonial empire in neighboring Vietnam, Cochin China. In 1863, Norodom signed a treaty with France, placing Cambodia under French protection. In exchange for French military protection against Siam and Vietnam, Cambodia ceded control of its foreign policy and trade to the French. Initially, the French presence was relatively light. Their primary goal was to use Cambodia as a buffer state to protect their Vietnamese colonies and to counter British influence in Siam. The French forced Siam to return the provinces of Battambang, Siam Reap, and Sisophon to Cambodia, which had been under Siamese control for over a century, effectively restoring the country's modern-day western borders. This act, ironically, helped to preserve Cambodia as a territorial entity. For King Norodom, the protectorate was a deal with the devil. He had saved his kingdom from its neighbors, only to cede its sovereignty to a new colonial master. Colonial life and nascent nationalism. Under the French protectorate, which was incorporated into French Indochina in 1887, Cambodian life was profoundly altered. While the French maintained the monarchy as a symbol, real power rested with the French resident general in Phnom Penh. The French introduced a Western-style bureaucracy, legal systems and infrastructure, building roads, bridges and a port. The economy was reoriented to serve French interests, with vast rubber plantations established in the eastern provinces, worked by Cambodian and Vietnamese laborers in harsh conditions. The French developed a two-tiered system. They educated a small Cambodian elite in French schools to serve as low-level administrators, while the vast majority of the population remained rural peasants. One of the most significant long-term impacts of French rule was the rediscovery and restoration of Angkor. French archaeologists and scholars, like Henri Mahor, brought the magnificent ruins to the world's attention, helping to forge a modern Cambodian national identity centered on the glory of its Angkorian past. However, French rule also bred resentment. High taxes, forced labor, and the arrogance of the colonial administration slowly nurtured the seeds of nationalism among the educated elite and Buddhist clergy, who began to dream of a Cambodia free from foreign control. World War II and the seeds of independence. The outbreak of World War II in Europe dramatically weakened France's grip on its colonies. In 1940, France fell to Nazi Germany, and its collaborationist Vichy government was in no position to defend Indochina. Seeing an opportunity, Imperial Japan moved its troops into Cambodia in 1941. The Japanese allowed the French administration to continue governing, but held the real power. This period was a catalyst for change. The myth of European invincibility was shattered. Japan, under its Asia for the Asiatics slogan, encouraged anti-colonial sentiment. In 1945, in the final months of the war, the Japanese authorities formally dissolved the French colonial administration and encouraged King Norodom Sihanouk, a young monarch placed on the throne by the French in 1941, whom they believed would be pliable to declare independence. This first taste of independence was short-lived, as the French returned after Japan's surrender. However, the experience had ignited a powerful nationalist movement. Figures like Son Ngoc Than led anti-French resistance, and King Sihanouk himself began to realize that his country's future lay in full sovereignty. 14. Independence and the Sangkum era of Sihanouk, 1953 to 1970. After the war, France attempted to reassert its control, but it was fighting a losing battle against nationalist movements across Indochina, most fiercely in Vietnam. King Sihanouk, in a shrewd political move, launched a royal crusade for independence, using international diplomacy to lobby for Cambodia's freedom. Recognizing the futility of holding on, France granted Cambodia full independence on November 9, 1953. In 1955, Sihanouk took the extraordinary step of abdicating the throne in favor of his father to enter politics directly. He created a political movement, the Sangkum Rachrat Niyum, People's Socialist Community, which dominated Cambodian politics for the next 15 years. This period, often romanticized as a golden age, was marked by Sihanouk's charismatic leadership and a foreign policy of strict neutrality in the Cold War. Phnom Penh blossomed into a vibrant modern city, and there was a flourishing of arts and culture, including a dynamic film industry led by Sihanouk himself. However, beneath the surface of peace and prosperity, Sihanouk's authoritarian rule suppressed all political dissent, alienating both the left and the right and creating deep fissures in Cambodian society. The creeping shadow. The Vietnam War and the bombing of Cambodia. Sihanouk's policy of neutrality became increasingly impossible to maintain as the Vietnam War escalated on his borders. In a desperate bid to placate his powerful communist neighbors, Sihanouk allowed North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces to establish bases and supply lines, the Ho Chi Minh Trail, in eastern Cambodia. This decision had catastrophic consequences. The United States, determined to disrupt these supply lines, began a secret and massive bombing campaign in Cambodia in 1969, codenamed Operation Menu. B-52s dropped more bombs on the Cambodian countryside than the Allies had dropped on Japan during all of World War II. The bombing devastated rural areas, killed tens of thousands of civilians, and destabilized the entire country. It also had a crucial, unintended effect. It drove countless enraged and displaced Cambodian peasants into the arms of a small, ultra-Maoist insurgent group that had been hiding in the jungles, the Khmer Rouge. The bombing was the single most important factor in the growth of this previously marginal group, turning it into a formidable fighting force. 16. The Khmer Republic and the Civil War, 1970 to 1975. While Sihanouk was abroad in March 1970, his pro-American Prime Minister General Lon Nol staged a coup d'état, abolishing the monarchy and establishing the Khmer Republic. The coup was welcomed by the United States, which immediately began pouring military and economic aid into the new anti-communist regime. From his exile in Beijing, an enraged Sihanouk made another fateful decision. He allied himself with his former enemies, the Khmer Rouge, urging his loyal followers to go into the jungle and fight against Lon Nol's government. This ignited a brutal 5-year civil war. The army of the Khmer Republic, though well supplied by the US, was corrupt and ineffective. The Khmer Rouge, backed by North Vietnam and legitimized by Sihanouk's name, steadily gained ground. The war, fueled by the ongoing American bombing, tore the country apart. Millions of refugees fled the devastated countryside and flooded into the capital, Phnom Penh, which became an island in a sea of conflict. By early 1975, the Khmer Republic was on the verge of collapse. On April 17, 1975, the black-clad soldiers of the Khmer Rouge entered Phnom Penh, welcomed by a war-weary population that hoped peace had finally arrived. They were tragically mistaken. 7. Democratic Kampuchea, the reign of the Khmer Rouge, 1975 to 1979. Upon taking power, the Khmer Rouge, led by the shadowy figure Pol Pot, immediately began to implement one of the most radical and brutal revolutions in human history. They declared Year Zero and set about systematically destroying every vestige of the old society. Their goal was to create a purely agrarian, classless communist utopia. Within hours of capturing Phnom Penh, they forcibly evacuated the entire population of the city, some 2 million people, and marched them into the countryside to work as slave laborers in vast agricultural communes. Money, markets, religion, and private property were abolished. Schools, hospitals, and temples were closed. The family unit was dismantled. Anyone associated with the former regime, soldiers, bureaucrats, teachers, doctors, was executed. People were killed for speaking a foreign language, wearing glasses, a sign of being an intellectual, or showing emotion. Starvation, disease, and overwork were rampant. This period, known as the rule of Democratic Kampuchea, was a state-sponsored genocide. In just 3 years, 8 months and 20 days, an estimated 1.7 to 2.2 million Cambodians, nearly a quarter of the country's population, perished in what became known as the killing fields. 89 Vishonant on the People's Republic of Kampuchea. The Khmer Rouge's extreme paranoia and aggressive nationalism led them to launch bloody cross-border raids into Vietnam. In response to this aggression, and to remove a hostile regime on its flank, Vietnam invaded Cambodia in December 1978. On January 7, 1979, Vietnamese forces captured Phnom Penh, overthrowing the Khmer Rouge regime. Pol Pot and the remnants of his forces fled to the jungles along the Thai border, where they would wage a guerrilla war for the next 2 decades, supported by China, Thailand, and, indirectly, the United States, who saw them as a useful tool against the Soviet-backed Vietnamese. Vietnam installed a new government in Phnom Penh, the People's Republic of Kampuchea, PRK, led by Khmer Rouge defectors, including Hun Sen. For the next 10 years, Cambodia was under Vietnamese occupation. While the Vietnamese invasion ended the genocide and allowed Cambodia to begin the slow process of rebuilding, the PRK was internationally isolated, recognized only by the Soviet bloc. A long, grinding civil war ensued between the Vietnamese-backed PRK government and a coalition of resistance groups based on the Thai border, which ironically included the Khmer Rouge. 19. The UTAC mission and the return of monarchy. With the end of the Cold War, the geopolitical dynamic shifted. In 1991, the 4 warring Cambodian factions signed the Paris Peace Accords, a landmark agreement designed to end the long civil war. This paved the way for the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia, UNTAC, one of the largest and most ambitious peacekeeping operations in UN history. From 1992 to 1993, UTAC's mission was to disarm the factions, repatriate refugees from the Thai border camps, and organize free and fair elections. Despite the Khmer Rouge's refusal to disarm and its boycott of the election, the 1993 poll was a resounding success, with over 90% of eligible Cambodians turning out to vote. The Royalist Party, Phun Sinpec, led by Prince Norodom Ranariddh, Sihanouk's son, won a narrow victory over Hun Sen's Cambodian People's Party, CPP. A fragile coalition government was formed, with Ranariddh as first prime minister and Hun Sen as second prime minister. A new constitution was adopted, and Norodom Sihanouk was restored to the throne as a constitutional monarch, a powerful symbol of national unity and reconciliation. 20. Contemporary Cambodia, reconstruction and challenges. The years following the UNTAC mission have been a period of profound transformation and persistent challenges. The fragile coalition government collapsed in 1997 when Hun Sen staged a bloody factional coup, ousting Prince Ranarridh and consolidating his power. Since then, Hun Sen and the CPP have dominated Cambodian politics, winning every election in an environment of shrinking democratic space and suppression of political opposition. The Khmer Rouge movement finally disintegrated in the late 1990s, with Pol Pot dying in 1998. A UN-backed tribunal was established to bring surviving Khmer Rouge leaders to justice for their crimes against humanity. Economically, Cambodia has experienced remarkable growth, driven by the garment industry, tourism centered on the magnificent Angkor complex, construction and agriculture. Phnom Penh has transformed into a bustling modern capital. However, this development has been uneven, and the country continues to grapple with systemic corruption, deforestation, land disputes, and significant human rights concerns. Today, Cambodia stands at a crossroads. It is a nation that has emerged from the ashes of genocide, a young and vibrant society looking to the future, yet it remains deeply shaped by its history, the glory of Angkor, the trauma of the killing fields, and the long ongoing struggle to build a just, prosperous, and truly democratic nation. The resilience of the Khmer people, who have endured so much, remains the country's greatest asset on this continuing journey.